It's safe to say that Marty Robbins was a race car driver who happened to sing. Born Martin David Robinson, the Country Music Hall of Fame member himself once said, "I know I'm not a race driver, but I feel like I am." I don't know about you, but I remember where I was at when the direction of my life was formed, Michigan International Speedway, on August 23rd, 1974, when I saw Richard Petty's fire red and petty blue Dodge go screaming by. Since then, probably just like you, we've been hooked. From our first media gig at the tender age of 15 in 1983 with Grand National Scene, to printing our own Supercars Today magazine in the 1990s, hence our name. Nothing against our open wheel friends, but if it has fenders, our nosy nature wants to find out the who, the why, and the how. We don't necessarily interview these people, we have conversations. So please subscribe to our channel and hit that bell to be notified of new content every Tuesday at noon. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment on, and share these videos. Today on the program, the Glendale, Arizona resident never entered more than 5 cup races per year because of his music. Even once racing locally at Nashville Fairgrounds, he pulled off the track mid-race while running with the leaders. Someone came running up and asked if the car had a problem. Marty replied, "No, that's as long as I can race. I've got to get over to the Opry." Robbins had quit a couple times before, saying, "I'm getting a little tired of my new job with NASCAR, chief wall tester." But he'd always come back. "Oh, I never said I'd retired. I just said I was tired." Famous for such hits as El Paso and White Sport Coat, among others, he came back in 1974 and finished 15th at Talladega, then followed that up with a 5th at Michigan, which would ultimately become his all-time best, and then another 9th at Talladega. Most race fans know the iconic black number 3, driven by the one and only Dale Earnhardt Sr., and owned by Richard Childress, former driver. The Winston-Salem, North Carolina resident was quite a shoe himself before getting out of the seat in 1981, logging 6 top 5s and 76 top 10s in 285 events over a 12-year career. Both of these two legends' paths would cross, in an unexpected way, at the National 500 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway on October 6, 1974. The weekend started with Buddy Baker newly, is that a word? Anyway, new in Bud Moore's number 15 Ford to finish up the season. Everyone knew the team had a shot at the pole. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, partly because Moore didn't like the tires they qualified on and wanted to change them. However, NASCAR's rule was that you must begin the race on the rubber you time trialed in, unless they had a defect. When NASCAR denied Bud's request to swap them out, he took an ice pick to them to make his own defect. NASCAR officials now allowed Moore to change them, but Baker would have to start shotgun on the field. 19-year-old Jerry Schild would be attempting his 4th race here at Charlotte. On this day, Schild continued to shine by clocking in 18th fastest. Veteran Dick Brooks almost didn't make this race, suffering a fire in his Spartanburg, South Carolina shop a few weeks before and almost burned his Simonized Dodge to the ground. However, with much assistance, the number 32 of Brooks was able to get to Charlotte and clocked in at 36th. The day dawned sunny and clear, with veteran David Pearson on the pole and Richard Petty right next to him, with the Wood Brothers entry, one of the favorites, having already won 5 of the season's first 28 events. And Pearson wasted no time in jumping out to the lead with Darrell Waltrip in tow. Back in the field, the lead-footed Baker was on the move, already into the top 20 at the end of the first lap. The rookie Schild, coming to the line for lap 2, got his wheels off the track and kicked up some dust in the infield, where the grass was supposed to be, caused by damage to it from an August rock concert. Baker, apparently blinded by the distraction, got into Brooks and turned him sideways. With almost half the field stacked up behind them, tire smoke billowing, and dust where grass was supposed to be, number 31 Jim Vandiver, number 06 Soapy Castles, number 18 Joe Frisson, and Childress got together. Now sitting in the middle of the track, the number 96 on the driver's door of Richard Childress loomed large in Marty Robbins' sight. When the smoke cleared and crews began cleaning up the carnage, most couldn't believe what they'd just seen as the crowd fell into a hush. Stated one official of the incident, what he did out there saved at least one life and probably kept other drivers from being maimed. Said Childress, "I'm not sure I can believe what I saw, because there was no way of me escaping injury and no way out of his path." That's right. Country crooner Marty Robbins had turned his purple, bright yellow, and green Dodge Charger, prepared by legendary owner Cotton Owens, head on into the wall. The only thing I knew was that there were people in those wrecked cars in front of me, and I couldn't hit one of them because they'd probably not walk away from it. Castles also made an erratic move to keep from T-boning Vandiver, which put them both through the inner guardrail. And it didn't take long to realize Marty was injured pretty badly. Marty added later, "All I could see was smoke and dust on the track and some cars flying around on the infield grass. I didn't want to run into somebody blind in the smoke, and there were cars out there on the infield, so I had to hit the wall. I wrecked my car pretty bad." In hearing quotes later, it kind of seemed like most of the drivers were looking to blame others. "I wasn't even hurrying," said Baker. "I saw the dust boiling and backed off. Then a car veered in front of me, and I swerved to miss it. Then I hit a car, I think it was Brooks, and we both went out of control." Brooks said, "I was going straight until I was hit." Asked if it was by Baker, he said, "I think that's who it was." Brooks also added later a driver just ran over him. Asked if he meant Baker, he replied yes. Others pointed the finger at rookie Schild, who actually had finished 8th in the recent Southern 500, which was only his 3rd Cup start. The Houston, Texas native said, "I hit a bump and the car got sideways. I was afraid of getting sideways out there on the track, and I went to the apron. Dust poured up all around me when I went off the side of the track." But, like one reporter said, blaming Schild is like blaming one Eskimo for the first snowfall. Having come very close to a drastic life change, Childress was understandably upset. "I got off the throttle because of the previous lap. Baker and Brooks were trying to win the race in one lap. They were in the dirt then. Some drivers cussed rookies at Darlington, and they are just as guilty of mistakes themselves," obviously referring to Baker. Meanwhile, Robbins exited his car to thunderous applause, but it was obvious he was injured and boarded a stretcher to be transported to Charlotte Memorial Hospital, where he received almost 40 stitches. "I took 30 in my head, 12 in my nose, broke 4 ribs, and then slammed back into my seat so hard I broke my tailbone." He added with a chuckle, "Thankfully I heal quick, but I hurt long. But actually I feel better than I thought I would after all that." Before all this happened, most racers respected the guitar-singing driver, saying they're more comfortable with him on the track than with others, but this day it solidified his presence even more. Richard Childress? Well, he had more to say. "There's no doubt in my mind I wouldn't be here talking to you right now if Marty Robbins hadn't risked his life to save me." A few days later, the man who penned 20th Century Drifter, a song about time behind the wheel of a race car, was playing a concert in Warrenton, Virginia, and he addressed his banged-up appearance by joking, "They didn't come here to look at my face. They came here to hear me sing." For most of those involved in the wreck, other than Schild, they competed beyond 1974. And Childress? Well, most know what happened in his career. Marty Robbins? Well, he didn't quit his day job. But what about his time holding that steering wheel? He finished last this day at Charlotte, but was back at Daytona in February of 1975, finished 13th in his 125, which qualified him for the 500, but he was involved in another spectacular early racing wreck, but was at Talladega 3 months later, only to crash out again in another massive pileup. And in 1976, in an apparent strategic move to avoid crashing, he played it safe and drove the pace car for the start of the Indianapolis 500. Marty Robbins would continue on his regular routine of making sporadic NASCAR Cup starts and took his final green flag at Atlanta in November of 1982 before dying a month later of a massive heart attack. Whether behind the guitar or behind the wheel, the legend of Marty Robbins will forever be remembered as one of the greatest of all time.